think about here right now. We will go on and take the next one as well. This is Perttu Pölönen, who will come up very soon, also a futurist, looking into, you can summarize everything he says in one sentence, from muscles to head to heart. A lot of good things to say about him. In 2018, MIT Tech Review honored him among the 35 innovators under 35 in Europe. So he's kind of a big shot here for us, and it's really good to have him here. And one of his books, I will actually read it myself. I just got a copy of it. I haven't read it before yet, but I will. Looking into that, it's called Future Skills. So let's just bring him up here and see what he has to show and share with us when it comes to insights as well. Perttu, where are you? There you are. Welcome, welcome. You get an applaud as well.
Thank you, thank you.
This is the first time they meet like this after the pandemic, so they're not used to it right yet. But
No,
we're
I'm
coming
not
there.
used to it either, because usually we just have to, look forward. Now you can rotate your head, and it's
Yeah,
luxury.
you can, right? So you have everyone here, plus of course the people on the other side of the lens.
Yes.
Still, but let's share your wisdom, and then we will have a panel discussion soon enough to listen to what both of you have said.
Yes,
So the
wonderful.
stage is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning. My name is Perttu, or Perttu, two pairs, and actually, many of the topics I will cover now are the same topics as Gerd talked about, but I guess every futurist has their different approach and angle. So I'll start with history. I'll start with the different revolutions we've had and go kind of through the evolution of work in a nutshell. So if we go back, we've had different eras, different revolutions, and each one of them has created a new type of work. If we go back thousands of years, what was the first revolution that changed our everyday lives? Agricultural. Now, what was the work it created? What was the new thing we started to do? Farmers. When technology develops, what does it do to us? It outperforms us. And this is why we do technology. Think of it this way. You can't look to different galaxies because your eyes are not good enough. So you develop technology, telescope, in order to do that. You can't look very small things. We need to have a microscope for that. We can't swim to a different country because our muscles are not enough. So we invent a boat. So basically we invent or we build technology when we would like to do something, but we can't. So in this way, the fact that technology is better than us, or it outperforms us, is not something unnatural that we should oppose, but it's why we do it in the first place. And it's been doing this for thousands of years, being better than us. So what did technology do to farmers? Well, we didn't need all of us to the farmhouses anymore, fields. Technology helped us, machines helped us. And it kind of forced us to go forward, find something new to do, because most of us were now unemployed. So what was the next era, next revolution that we got? Industrial. Now, what was the work that was created with industrial era? So what did we become as an adult? Well, now we were factory workers. When technology again developed, what did it do to factory workers? Well, technology, machines were obviously much faster, cheaper. They didn't make mistakes. You were able to run them overnight. So again, they were better than us, and we again had to find something new to do. The third revolution, third time, is now where we are at right now. What is the world we're living in right now? What's the environment? Now it's the information revolution. The access to information is bigger than we've ever had. So what are all of us? What's the one word, one kind of title to describe most of the work we are doing today? Information professionals. Of course, we have titles from end to end. We have doctors, we have lawyers, we have teachers, and so on. But basically what they do, they just manage information. If you think of your job, what do you do at the end of the day? It's emails, Excels, it's PowerPoint, it's sending, receiving, editing. It's all about just managing information in one way or another. If you're a teacher, you use pedagogy. If you're a doctor, you make diagnosis. So basically what your job is, you just analyze information. And for this professional, the capabilities or the quality of your thinking is the quality of your work. So what can you do with the data you have? What resources can you exploit to your benefit? Now, what will happen next is what we've seen before as well. Machines, computers, technology, again, outperforms us. Well, first of all, what is the technology that's now better at handling information than us? I'm talking about AI, analytics, right? They were built to analyze information. You can't read 1,000 scientific papers overnight, but a machine can. So that's wonderful. You can't calculate 1,000 calculations per second, but machine can. So they are better at that. And again, they will push us somewhere where we haven't been before yet. So now we get to the subject. What is the next revolution, next era? What do you think? Where are we going next? What is the era we should, educate our children to? I would say it's the human revolution. Because the more digitalized or more technological our societies will become, the more humane they should also become. Right now, that's not the case, because technology has gone very fast, very forward. But now we are lacking, we're behind. And they have the better half right now. So what would be the future archetype worker? What title, what name can we come up with? I would say a creative problem solver. So if we look at this development, we've gone from the farmhouses to factories, from factories to offices. From offices, we will move on. We won't be there forever. So the skills we've had, first it was muscles, right? Because you needed strength in order to perform in the agricultural era. That was the main thing to have. You need to work with your body. But machines outperform your muscles. We had to move to the head. So now we started to educate people. We go to cities, industrial revolution, right? Learn this, remember this, this is your degree. And now in the information era, who wins, you or Google? Who has more information, you or the internet? Which one wins, your brain or the basically capabilities computers have? Binary systems. We can't stay here forever. So, next to the heart. The computer doesn't have a personality. They don't have childhoods. They haven't lived. They don't breathe. They're not present in the same way. So, from muscles to head, from head to heart. Now, what makes this difficult for us to grasp is that it happens faster than before. So, how long did we spend in the agricultural era? For thousands of years. Well, what about industrial? Hundreds of years. What about information? Just decades. And we're moving forward already. Of course, every time we have been challenged, we've tried to slow it down, we've opposed it. It's not going to take my job, this is something it should not do, and this is unethical, and we've tried to fight against it, the technology. And people have been afraid. But every time the technology, at the end of the day, has won the race and pushed us to find something new. And I think this is a good thing, because every time we've been challenged, we've kind of been pushed to something more humane, something that is even more important in our lives. So I would say, let it happen. This is a good thing. But now the question is, how are we different from these technologies, from these machines and computers? I mean, if you had to explain the differences between humans and computers to a 7-year-old, let's say first grader, how would you explain it? Because this is fundamentally important for every parent, every teacher. How does a computer think? How does a human think? The problem is that we are very far from technology. How many of here has ever built a network? Just a simple network internet to your community, or build a robot? How many of you have ever touched sensors or transistors? We're far from them. So we kind of build this identity that I'm not a technological person, like far from me. Like I don't need to understand that. And that's a very bad thing. So now the question is, how do humans and computers differ from each other? What's the fundamental difference? Now, we both use data, right? But we use different kind of data. What is the data that computers need? Or what's their favorite food? What kind of data? Well, computers like well-defined data, exact things, right? So when I say 10 or square root 16 or 72%, you can't argue about that. That's precise. But we humans, we have a language, and we can use words and terms that are very not well-defined. So like a lot, little, good, bad, right, wrong. How do you define that? It doesn't work like that. So when we are given a problem in life, where we have to use our interpretation to understand this word. That's where we have an advantage to the computer. So let's say I have 10 blueberries on my hand. Well, you all understand that because 10 is the number here. And a computer understands that too. But if I say I have a lot of blueberries here, it's very easy for you. You can even imagine what it looks like. You understand what I mean, the purpose, the meaning. But if I tell a computer there's a lot of blueberries here, it gets confused. What is a lot? Is it 600 or 2 or 72%? Where do you draw the line? What is a lot, right? If I tell that there's an ant or a frog, running, jumping on the floor and jumps on this podium, you all realize that the frog can never jump so high. It's impossible. It won't happen. But if I tell a computer, hey, there's a frog and it jumps on the podium, the frog doesn't have an intuition. The computer doesn't have an intuition. Like they don't just get the feeling that it won't happen. They have to calculate in order to solve this problem, because that's how they function. So the computer needs all the parameters in order to form the function. So what is the size of the frog, right? What's the length of the arm? What's the jumping technique? What's the height of the podium? The angle, everything. And then it calculates and gets an answer, an exact number. Let's say a frog can jump with these parameters 0.0567257 meters, which is less than the podium. Meaning answer is negative, it won't happen, it can't happen. So even though humans and computers both arrive at the right answer, we used very different kind of thinking to get there. And this is kind of the point here. Whenever you are given a problem or a challenge where you have to take into consideration, for example, the culture we're in. So what does that saying really mean? Like, what is the meaning behind what you just did? It depends on the culture. How do you interpret that? Or you have to take into consideration social norms. So what is the right way to behave in this situation? Or history. This sentence can mean something very different based on the history we have. This is where we have an advantage in the future to the computers. So here's a list where we are naturally good. Humans, we have morals, we have imagination, we can talk about abstract things, we like to discuss dilemmas and so on. We don't have to try to be like this. This comes easy for us. Machines, by nature, they have endless capacity, right? They have very good pattern recognition skills. So they, in a big data mass, they find correlations easy. That's easy for them. It's wonderful that no human has to do that, because we were not built for that. Nobody feels like I'm at my happiest when I get to be quick and perfect, and this is not something natural for us. We have to educate ourselves into this. But computers will be better at this in the future, and already are. I asked a professor at MIT Media Lab some years ago that how long does it take for machines to be smarter than us? This is something Gert asked as well. And the professor said, Perttu, you said smarter. What do you mean by that word? That's a very well, badly defined, because smart, don't use the word like that, because it kind of shows that you don't know what you're talking about. Because we have 8 different kinds of intelligences, right? Mathematical and spatial and musical and language. And so you have to be precise when you make a comparison. What are you actually talking about? Not just better or smarter, because that's just a too big generalization. And it was a very good lesson for me. Because yes, an AI has gotten into a university, but I would still say that a squirrel is better than any AI in the world, even the best one, because a squirrel has instincts. It can survive in the nature. So how do you code that? So it's all about what are we actually comparing. It's very important to keep in mind. So what we have to be careful of is that we don't kind of educate people who are successful in the past. This is what we need. This is what we should focus on. The challenge is, how do we teach these type of skills? This is what makes us different from machines. Well, the challenge is that it's very difficult to measure skills like this. I mean, how can you teach empathy? Can you make a test that says your reliability has now risen 20% from last year? Or can you say that your compassion is now grade 8? It doesn't work like that. And because we can't really test or measure it, we haven't been teaching it because it's difficult. How do we do that? We have right and wrong answers when it comes to mathematics. We have right and wrong answers when it comes to grammatics. But about self-discipline, it doesn't work like that. And because we develop what we can measure, and we need to have a test result, we need to have diploma, this is where we we have problems. If a young person goes to a job interview and says, I'm empathetic, I'm courageous, I'm creative, everybody wants a person who is like this. But they can't show any validation for the claim. There's nothing to really say that I am like this. So this is the challenge. How do we develop skills that we can't show numbers, at least in the traditional ways? How can we develop education when the metrics have to be changed? I mean, we have already a lot of research. For example, doctors. If they are empathetic towards the patient gets better sooner. Good, communication, when you really meet him or her, it helps. But how long are the visits to the doctor usually? Approximately. It's like 15 minutes. Now, somebody could say that 15 minutes is not enough for empathy because we need more time to really slow down and talk. So let's give it 30 minutes. But I would get an argument immediately that that's not good for the system because 15 is more efficient. We get 4 in an hour, so why would we make it loser, right? That doesn't make any sense. So this is the problem. We don't want to make the world more efficient, but better. And there's a difference. We can make very efficient our schools, our banks, our shops, our whatever. Let's make robots run them. We could already do that. It's not difficult. But will they become better? Tell me. I think I want somebody to look me in the eye when I go to the bank and explains me stuff. Maybe the person in the shop can create an environment, a nice mood to the shop. So many times digitalization is being kind of argued in favor of, well, we are going to make it more efficient, and we're going to save a lot of money. We optimize, but if it doesn't become better, then we should not do that. Because the worst thing that can happen is not that we fail, but rather we succeed in something that doesn't matter. And this is the challenge. Our future generations are not only unemployed in the future, they're unemployable because they don't have the right skills. So we are successful in the very wrong things just because our metrics kind of push us that way. Show me the number, show me the test result, show me the diploma. Now, what can I get from you that I can't get from Google? Why would I come to you and not Google things? Or anyway, use internet, AI, robotics. Google can't look me in the eye. Google can't hug me. Google can't touch me on the shoulder. Google doesn't have a childhood. Google has all the information in the world, but it doesn't care. It's not present. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't have any warmth. So we need to recognize the things that are unique for us and build our knowledge on top of that, because that's the competitive advantage, against these guys. Or if we ask at school, what's the capital of, let's say, the United States? This is a traditional question. We have a right answer, a lot of wrong answers. And just asking this question creates a culture in the classroom that somebody knows and they raise their hand and they feel good about themselves. And all the other people, somebody doesn't know and they feel bad. They try to avoid eye contact with the teacher, right? Then there's somebody who thinks they know, they have a wrong answer, and they say it out loud and people laugh at them. Like, you were wrong. Of course it's not this and that city. So just the type of question creates this tension in the classroom, right? But you can Google a capital very quickly, very easily. So remembering that is not very valuable in this sense. But if we change the question, if I ask, what's the most important city in the United States? All of a sudden I take away the right answer. Because the most important can be any city, as long as you tell me why. You can say, well, Los Angeles, in my opinion, because it's maybe the most well-known, or the media, the entertainment is there. Or you can say, no, I think it's New York because of the capital of economics in the States. Or you can say DC because of the national politics and so on. It all depends on how you argue in favor of it. So this is a skill. If you ask Google, what's the most important city? Well, Google hasn't lived anywhere. It doesn't have an opinion. It can't form a view like this. So just by changing the question, we can get some information from a person that we could not get from Google. So think of this. We are going to change the path from this that used to be kind of nice because we had control to this which is uncertain. In the old world, we had a playbook. If you do this, you're going to be successful. If you get this job or this degree, you're going to make this amount of money. And it was nice because we were able to affect our own future. There was good or secure jobs, and of course every parent wants their children to have a good, secure job. But it's not the case anymore. We know that micro-entrepreneurship is on the rise. We know that gig economy is getting more popular. And there's a lot of uncertainty. Not any degree will guarantee your life very much further. I mean, if I had the power, I would put best before dates to every degree. So that people would kind of realize that it will get rotten and you have to update it. So we have to be careful. When I was a kid, I had a laptop, I had internet, I had a smartphone. My parents didn't. A couple of big technological breakthroughs and completely different environment in which to be brought up. It's not going to end in 3, right? We're going to have maybe 5, maybe 10 in the coming years. So if we go back 100 years, maybe even further, parents and children, they lived very similar lives. They were almost identical, the life paths. Even the profession might have gone forward. But if you now think of yourself, if you have children, and your own life path, they don't look anything like each other. They're not identical anymore. So we have to be careful. What worked for us is not going to work for them. I had one gentleman once come to me and say, Perttu, no matter what happens, 2 things never go away in the world. People will always argue with each other, fight, and they will always get sick. So a lawyer or a doctor, this is a good job for it, right? Well, where will the AI go first? These exact jobs. So even though it sounded logical, yeah, it makes sense. He hadn't taken AI into consideration. So the environment in which we have lived for most of our history, it developed locally, right? So we lived in local communities, and if somebody invented something else on the other side of the world, we didn't hear about that. There was nothing to kind of help each other. And also, the development was linear. So if I did something, it didn't become viral. It didn't kind of go anywhere because of, well, geographical barriers or language barriers or country borders. We had limitations to kind of share good ideas, good knowledge. So this is where we build our nations, our structures, our education systems. This is a local and linear environment. Well, for the last about 30 years, the World Wide Web, hyper-globalization, has the development for the last 30 years, has it been linear anymore? Well, no, exponential, like we heard, accelerating. Has it been local? Well, obviously not. It's global now. So if something happens on the other side of the world, we hear an analysis of it in the evening news. It changes our lives the next day. So if you put these together, I mean, thousands of years and 30 years, it's quite an interesting time to be alive. We have people who have been brought up in a very different environment, right? In history, how have we learned new skills? Well, from our parents. From fathers to sons, from mothers to daughters, from teachers to students, they kind of gave us the general knowledge forward as a tradition. And when our children, were adults, they gave it forward. And generation by generation, we accumulated that knowledge. Now, when the world changed and we got this new environment, a lot of knowledge and competence was outdated because the new environment was so different that it didn't make any sense to teach many of the skills forward anymore. I mean, probably many of you have used a phone book, maybe, in your childhood. Maybe you have rewind a cassette tape, or you have, I don't know, these type of, the rotatable landline phone. Something that was key, essential to know, but completely useless to teach forward anymore. And at the same time, the children, they were very quick at adapting and taking all these new technologies. So they learned very fast how it works, because they didn't have to unlearn. That was the first language for them, which means that now they adapted faster. Now the teenagers are telling their parents how to use the phone. Imagine this. The children are telling their grandparents fundamental knowledge without which you can't survive in the future, like how to use a laptop. So has there ever been a time in human history where competence hasn't gone from the older to the younger, but actually the other way around? Name one time in history when this was even possible. So I don't think it has ever happened before. And the young people can't really ask for help either. If a 5-year-old asks, "Hey, grandma, what apps did you use when you were my age?" The grandma cannot give the wisdom forward. She didn't have any apps, right? A 15-year-old, if he asks, "Hey, mom or dad, what did it feel like when you were bullied online as a teenager?" The mom or the dad they don't have any idea what it might feel like. So we might grow apart, and this is a challenge, because we had such different environments. I was in Myanmar. I founded a non-profit there. And my friend had this 9-10-year-old girl who had her birthday coming up. And she was shouting that, "I want a factory on my desk for my birthday." And nobody realized, what is she talking about? A factory on a desk. Until somebody said, "Hey, she's talking about 3D printers, but she doesn't know the word." So we whispered, "It's a 3D printer." Well, she ran to her mom, grandmother, and shouted with enthusiasm, "I want a 3D printer for my birthday." And I was just witnessing the situation from afar. The parents, they didn't know. They've never heard of 3D printer. They were not able to react in any way to the child's emotion, because they just didn't know what it is. So that's when I started thinking, like, is it possible that we grow apart? We don't understand each other's worlds anymore. So we need cross-generational dialogue very, very much. If you think of global population, this gets even more interesting, because how many people are less than 30? So basically, less than 30. How many people in the world? The right answer is over half of the population globally. Now, if you look around, does it look like every other person is under 30 around you? No. We are in a bubble here. In the Nordics, in Europe, we have a completely opposite age structure. We have a lot of older people. So we don't realize that every other should be under 30, every fourth under 14, which means that in about 10 to 15 years, like almost 4 billion people are coming to workforce. So they're overrepresented as voters, as customers, as workers. If you want to achieve anything or be successful at anything, you have to take into consideration this age group, because there's just so many of them, half of the population. Some estimates say that in 2 to 3 years, half of the population on Earth has been born in the 21st century. Just 2 to 3 years. Think of it. Now, if you remember the time before internet, so you're over 30 basically, think of it. You will go down as the last people ever on human history who knows what it's like. Like, you remember that. Like, I'm 1 year younger than World Wide Web, and nobody after me will ever know what it might feel like. So it's quite a big change that we're talking about here. We need to redefine many things. 30 years ago, what was power and who had it? It's very different than what it's today. 30 years ago, privacy, very different than what it's today. 30 years ago, general knowledge, today, different. 30 years ago, communication, money, love, basic things we have to redefine. One of them is expertise. Today you can have a 17-year-old who's very good with social media. They understand algorithms, they know everything about social media. So I could say a 17-year-old might be the best social media consultant in the country. Nobody is as good as this teenager. But if I brought this teenager here on stage and I told you this is the best in the country, you might be a bit puzzled, because a 17-year-old doesn't look like an expert. They don't wear experts' clothes. They don't talk like experts. They don't behave like experts behave. Nothing about them reminds us of the image we have about experts. because we are still kind of stuck. It's certain type of talking, a certain type of image, and because it used to be this linear. With age, with experience, this is how you kind of become an expert. But now you can have a 17-year-old who is the first generation, first Google generation, first multimedia generation, who's actually an expert in what it's like to be their age. So we need to also understand that expertise is changing. This is a future curriculum I put together. It's also the structure of my book. In Silicon Valley, I asked Ray Kurzweil, if he was my age, I was 21 at the time, I was at NASA, what would you go to study if you were my age? And he said, well, it doesn't make any sense to study anything more at these days than philosophy or fine arts. Because this is what doesn't change, your attitude, your personality, your thinking skills, your capabilities. So start with that. You can then, later, you can specialize if you want to, but start with what doesn't get old. I think this was a wonderful piece of advice. I asked Peter Norvig, who is chief research officer at Google. He has been researching AI for decades. I asked him, is it possible that the computers will have intuition or emotions, or can they be reactive? Can they have consciousness? And he asked me, well, can you tell me what makes up a consciousness? And I said, of course not. We have been arguing about this for hundreds of years. Philosophers have talked about this. We don't know. And he said, well, how would we build that then to a machine if we don't understand our own? And why would we even want to? We have almost 8 billion real intelligence, right? And we know how to reproduce. There's no shortage of that. So what is the added value if we get 9 billion or 10 billion? We are not aiming at that. But we want to develop intelligence that we don't have. So they're not trying to replace us or try to be like us. That's not the goal. It wouldn't make any sense because we want to have something that we can't do. So it's a collaboration at the end of the day. And I would say that we need to balance the technological development with these human skills. Here's just some of them. But for the last kind of wrap up, 5 things that we can also or already pay attention to today when we think of work. 5 questions to all of you. Is the value of your work based on where you get it done? So are we really tied into the office spaces, or can we actually ease a bit with that? Autonomy. Are your teams empowered to act, or do they first need to ask? Reflection. Learning comes from reflection. It's not when you get the information, it's when you think, what did you do? And that's when you internalize it. Memory. Are decisions documented for others to learn and review? So is it actually social, or are we alone? Objectivity. Do you let data challenge what you say? Velocity. When change occurs, how fast are you to respond? I've learned that it's not a good thing to be first. That's not the goal, because usually the first one, there's a lot of legwork for them. It's expensive, and usually the first doesn't succeed. But it's the fast second who learns from the first mistakes, and fast second is actually who makes it. But the problem for us in Europe, I would say, many times, and elsewhere as well, is that we are slow fifths. So how can we be a bit more courageous? Not be the first. Let's not try to reinvent everything. No, that would be a waste of time and money. But somebody has tried something interesting already, that's for sure. So do we have the capabilities to be the fast second? Or do we want to wait until we have enough benchmark and when it's kind of obvious that, okay, this is what we should do, and then we're slow fifths? So let's make sure that we help each other. Young people have energy, they are willing to take risks and so on. It's a good thing, but older people, they know what doesn't change, what's important in life. They have, experience. We should not value speed over depth. And that's unfortunately what we're doing right now. What's happening next month? Where are you next year? What are you going to become, and so on. Technology is the easy part. We understand exponential. We've talked about them for 20 years. We know that. Humans are difficult. But for some reason, we still don't understand humans. We talk about human resources. Humans are not a resource. oil is a resource. There's no potential in humans. There's potential in physics, in markets. But for some reason we talk about your full potential and resources. And we have aspirations, we have personalities, we have dreams. So this is what we need to focus on more, and we need to find ways to measure or somehow make it more concrete so that it's actually worthwhile developing this, because we are so that we want to have something tangible. It is just so. How do you know if you have developed your courage over the last year? You don't know, but if somehow you would get some kind of recognition for it, it would be easier to develop that. So, let's not only think what will change, because that's easy. Everybody can throw ideas and guesses. That's cheap. But things that don't change is what I'm at. You know, tell me 3 things that don't change in education at all, in a good way, in the next 20 years. Then you know this is something very valuable, so this is core for us. So it's easier to invest when you know that this is not going to go in vain. It's going to last. We can build on this. So understand what changes, but mostly what doesn't change, and be good at that. Human skills will never go in vain. So with this, thank you very much.
Thank you, Perttu. Thank you. Can I ask you before you leave, did you go on a philosophy class afterwards?
Yes.
You did?
Yes, and I actually wrote that in my matriculation examination in Finland. So, yes.
I need to talk to my kids, that's for sure, and get them to do the same. Thank you very much, Perttu. All right, cool.